Emma's day began with sharp pains that made her double over in her hospital office. At 28 weeks pregnant, any complication meant danger. Her colleague, Dr. Sarah Martinez, found her clutching her desk, face pale with fear. "Call an ambulance," Sarah ordered a nurse, "and someone get hold of Michael Chen." In the emergency room, monitors beeped steadily as Emma's hand trembled, dialing Michael's number for the 7th time. Voicemail. Again. Her texts went unanswered. "Emergency. At hospital. Please come." The baby kicked forcefully, as if sensing her mother's distress. "Blood pressure's too high." The attending physician muttered, "Mrs. Chen, we need to keep you here for observation. Where's your husband?" Emma's laugh was hollow. "Good question." Her fingers moved automatically to the Find My iPhone app, a last resort she'd never used before. The blue dot indicating Michael's location pulsed mockingly at her. Le Petit Jardin, the most romantic restaurant in San Francisco. "Sarah," Emma called to her friend, "I need a favor." 20 minutes later, Emma stood outside Le Petit Jardin, still wearing her hospital scrubs, an IV port taped to her arm. Her doctor's badge hung around her neck. She'd promised she'd return to the hospital immediately. Through the restaurant's ornate windows, she saw them. Michael sat at a corner table, holding Sophia's hand. A small blue box from Tiffany & Co. sat between them. As Emma watched, paralyzed, Michael slipped a diamond ring onto Sophia's finger. The matron tried to stop her, but Emma moved past him with the determination of a woman with nothing left to lose. The restaurant fell silent as she approached their table, her hospital bracelet catching the candlelight. "Don't get up," she said, her voice surprisingly steady as Michael and Sophia froze in horror. "I wouldn't want to interrupt this special moment." Phones around the restaurant began recording discreetly, the drama too juicy to ignore. "Emma," Michael stammered, dropping Sophia's hand. "What are you? Why are you in scrubs?" "Oh, just a medical emergency," Emma replied, her hand instinctively moving to her swollen belly. "Your daughter and I had a little scare, but clearly you had more pressing engagements." Sophia started to slide the ring off, but Emma stopped her. "Keep it. It suits you. Beautiful, expensive, and completely hollow." The restaurant had become so quiet you could hear ice clinking in water glasses. Silicon Valley's elite watched the scene unfold, their phones capturing every moment. "Emma, please," Michael stood, reaching for her arm. "Let me explain." "Explain." Emma's voice finally cracked. "Explain how you missed every prenatal appointment, how you're never home, how you're buying engagement rings while your wife carries her child." Her voice rose with each question. "Or explain how you promised to love me forever while planning a future with her." Sophia finally spoke, her voice cool and collected. "This is hardly the place for." "You don't speak," Emma cut her off. "You don't get to say a word to me." Michael's face hardened, his embarrassment turning to anger. "Emma, you're making a scene. This isn't good for the baby." "No. What isn't good for the baby is having a father who—" Emma stopped suddenly, gasping. A wet patch appeared on her scrubs. "My water just broke," she whispered, color draining from her face. 28 weeks. The restaurant erupted in chaos. Someone called 911. A doctor dining nearby rushed over. Through it all, Michael stood frozen, watching his two worlds collide catastrophically. As paramedics rushed Emma out on a stretcher, Michael finally found his voice. "Emma, I'm sorry, but I found real love with Sophia. What we had, it died months ago." The last thing Emma saw before the ambulance doors closed was Sophia's hand on Michael's shoulder, the new diamond catching the street lights like a tear. The first sign of trouble came during Genesis Tech's darkest hour. Michael sat in his office at 3 a.m., staring at an email that threatened everything he built. A Chinese competitor had launched a hostile takeover attempt, and their opening move was brilliant and brutal. "Sophia," he called out, expecting to find her working late as she always had during crisis. But her desk outside his office sat empty, her Hermes bag absent from its usual perch. His call went straight to voicemail. When she finally appeared the next morning, she carried a Starbucks cup and wore sunglasses inside, clearly hungover. "God, you look terrible," she remarked, taking in his disheveled appearance. Did something happen? Did something? Michael stared at her incredulously. We could use the company. I've been calling you all night. Sophia shrugged, examining her fresh manicure. I was at the opening of that new rooftop bar. You know how important networking is in this industry. She paused, her perfectly painted lips curling into a slight frown. Besides, isn't this why you have a team? Must everything be a crisis? Her words hit him like a slap. He remembered countless nights when Emma had brought him dinner during company emergencies, how she'd sit quietly in his office, offering support without demands. The comparison came unbidden, unwanted. The next week brought more revelations. During a crucial board meeting about the takeover defense, Michael noticed Sophia texting continuously under the table. Her screen reflected in the glass wall behind her messages to James Morrison, CEO of their biggest competitor. Care to explain? He confronted her later in their penthouse. Morrison's company is trying to destroy us, and you're texting him during our strategy meeting. Sophia's laugh was cold, practiced. Oh, darling. Did you really think I'd limit my options to just one tech CEO? She walked to their bar, pouring herself a generous glass of champagne. A girl has to keep her opportunities open. Opportunities? The word tasted bitter in his mouth. Is that what I am to you? An opportunity? Don't be dramatic, Michael. It doesn't suit you. She waved her hand dismissively, diamonds catching the light. Of course I care for you. But let's be realistic. I didn't leave my consulting career to play housewife. The mention of housewife triggered another unwanted memory. Emma at her hospital, saving children's lives while carrying their baby. She'd never needed his status or money to have purpose. Sophia's demands grew more outrageous with each passing day. A weekend shopping spree in Paris, a yacht party in Monaco, a private jet for her girls' weekend in the Maldives. You're being ridiculous, he said when she demanded a third sports car. We're in the middle of a corporate war, and I'm stuck here playing supportive partner while you obsess over spreadsheets. She threw a crystal tumbler against the wall, its shatter echoing their relationship's deterioration. I didn't sign up for this boring corporate husband routine. The next morning, Michael discovered unauthorized wire transfers from the company's accounts, small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums, all traced back to Sophia's private account. When questioned, her response chilled him. Consider it relationship insurance, she smiled, that same calculating smile he'd once found so alluring. After all, I know where all the bodies are buried, don't I? Every meeting with competitors, every bent rule, every shortcut we took together. Standing in their designer kitchen, watching Sophia calmly sip her coffee after essentially blackmailing him, Michael finally saw what Emma must have seen that night at Le Petit Jardin. Not love, but a perfectly orchestrated performance by a master manipulator. What happened to us? He whispered, more to himself than to her. Sophia's laugh was like breaking glass. Oh, honey, there was never an us. There was only what I wanted and what you were willing to give to get it. The maternity ward at San Francisco General Hospital buzzed with early morning activity as Michael stood before the nursery window. Through the glass, he could see Emma in a wheelchair, cradling their newborn daughter. Her sister Claire hovered protectively nearby, shooting daggers at him with her eyes. He hadn't been allowed in the delivery room, a consequence of his choices that stung more than any business loss. Lily Chen read the small card on the bassinet. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, born 3:42 am. He pressed his hand against the glass, trying to memorize every detail of his daughter's tiny face. Emma looked up, their eyes meeting briefly through the window. The hurt he saw there made his recent humiliation by Sophia seem true. The crystal chandeliers of Le Ciel cast a warm glow over the intimate corner table when Michael and Emma Chen celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary. At 38, Michael cut an impressive figure in his tailored Tom Ford suit, his success as CEO of Genesis Tech evident in every carefully curated detail of his appearance. Emma, in an elegant emerald dress that complemented her dark hair, radiated a different kind of success, the quiet confidence of a woman who saved lives daily as one of San Francisco's most respected pediatricians. Happy anniversary, my love. Michael raised his glass of Chateau Lafite, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The city lights twinkled 40 stories below, a glittering carpet beneath their feet. Emma's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, her eyes shining with barely contained excitement. "Before we toast," she said, reaching into her clutch, "I have something for you." She slid a small white envelope across the white linen tablecloth. Michael's perfectly manicured fingers lifted the flap, and he pulled out a black and white sonogram image. For a moment, time stood still as understanding dawned in his dark eyes. "Emma," his voice caught. "Are you?" 8 weeks, she whispered, happy tears threatening to spill. "We're going to be parents, Michael." The genuine joy that spread across his face masked the sudden tightening in his chest. He rose from his chair and pulled Emma into a tender embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of her Chanel perfume. As he held her, his mind was already racing through calculations, board meetings, the upcoming IPO, expansion plans into Asian markets. Later that night, in their Pacific Heights mansion, Michael stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of their bedroom, San Francisco Bay a dark mirror before him. Emma slept peacefully in their king-size bed, one hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. In the window's reflection, he studied the careful facade he built, successful CEO, devoted husband, soon-to-be father. But beneath that polished surface, panic clawed at his insides. His phone vibrated silently in his pocket. A message from Harrison, his CFO. "Crisis with the Singapore deal. Need you on an emergency call." Michael glanced at Emma's sleeping form, remembering her words from dinner about wanting him more present during the pregnancy. He'd promised to cut back on late nights, to be there for doctor's appointments and birthing classes. As he typed a quick reply to Harrison, another message popped up. "Jang from Hong Kong waiting on the line. Deal might fall through." The familiar surge of adrenaline coursed through his veins. The thrill of crisis management, of million-dollar decisions hanging in the balance. This was his element, where he truly felt alive. Moving with practiced stealth, Michael collected his laptop and jacket. He paused at the bedroom door, looking back at Emma. In sleep, she looked younger than her 34 years, her face serene with the joy of their news. A tendril of guilt wrapped around his heart as he thought of their dinner conversation about building a proper family life, about him being more present. Just this one call, he whispered to himself, the same promise he'd made countless times before. But Emma wasn't asleep. Through barely opened eyes, she watched him slip away again, just as he had so many nights before, her hand pressed against her stomach, where their miracle grew after years of trying. As the soft click of the front door echoed through their quiet home, a single tear rolled down her cheek. "Please," she whispered to the darkness, "don't let this baby change us for the worse." In his Tesla, racing toward the office, Michael loosened his tie and switched to business mode. The pregnancy news receded to the back of his mind as he focused on damage control for the Singapore deal. He didn't notice the slight tremor in his hands, the physical manifestation of a life beginning to spin out of control. The Genesis Tech boardroom hummed with tension as Michael Chen prepared to present the Morrison merger details. His tablet chimed with another missed call from Emma, the third one today. He'd promised to attend her 12-week ultrasound, but the meeting couldn't wait. The future of his company hung in the balance. "We should proceed with the signing," Harrison concluded, sliding the contracts across the polished mahogany table. The board members nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting the same exhaustion from the 6-hour negotiation marathon. "Wait," a crisp voice cut through the room like a steel blade. All heads turned toward Sofia Martinez, the newest consultant from McKinsey. She stood, her Louboutin heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she approached the display screen. Her charcoal Armani suit accentuated every curve, but it was her sharp intelligence that commanded attention. "Section 7.2 of the contract," she continued, her manicured finger tracing the projection. "The intellectual property transfer clause has a loophole. If we sign this, Morrison Tech could potentially claim ownership of Genesis's core AI patents within 3 years. Michael's breath caught. How had everyone missed this? The room erupted in murmurs as Sophia methodically outlined the potential catastrophe they'd nearly walked into. Her dark eyes met his across the table, and something electric passed between them, the shared thrill of averting disaster, of seeing what others couldn't. Later that evening, as the sunset painted San Francisco's skyline in shades of amber, Michael found Sophia in the empty conference room. She stood by the window, her silhouette outlined in golden light. "That was impressive today," he said, maintaining a professional distance. "You saved us from a costly mistake." Sophia turned, a subtle smile playing on her crimson lips. "I did my homework, Mr. Chen. Your AI patents are the crown jewels of Genesis Tech. I wouldn't let anyone compromise that. Please call me Michael." He moved closer, ostensibly to examine the contract she was holding. Her perfume, something exotic and expensive, teased his senses. "Would you be interested in joining our strategy team for the duration of this merger?" "Private sector isn't usually my thing," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of challenge. "I prefer the freedom of consulting. I can make it worth your while." The words came out before he could check them, and something shifted in the air between them. Sophia's laugh was low and musical. "Careful, Michael. That could sound like a proposition." He stepped back, suddenly aware of their proximity. His phone buzzed again. "Emma?" The ultrasound. Guilt flooded his system. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "But we should discuss this further. Tomorrow?" "Over dinner," Sophia suggested. "Purely professional, of course. I know this excellent French place in Nob Hill." That night, Michael arrived home to find Emma asleep on the couch, her medical journals scattered around her. An ultrasound image lay on the coffee table, their baby's first picture, and he hadn't been there to see it. He covered her with a blanket, his hand hovering over her slightly rounded belly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "The company needed me." But as he lay in bed that night, it wasn't the missed ultrasound that kept him awake. It was the memory of Sophia's knowing smile, the intellectual spark in her eyes, the way she'd seen what everyone else had missed. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen, truly challenged. His phone lit up with a message. "Reservation at La Maison. 8 p.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. SM." Michael stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the reply button. Down the hall, he could hear Emma getting sick, morning sickness that struck at all hours. He should go to her, hold her hair back, be the supportive husband she deserved. Instead, he typed, "I'll be there." The Dubai Tech Conference should have been Michael's triumph. Genesis Tech had successfully fought off the hostile takeover attempt, their stock was soaring, and he was scheduled to deliver the keynote speech. Instead, he found himself in a heated argument with Sophia in their luxurious suite at the Burj Al Arab. "A $5 million beach house is perfectly reasonable," Sophia insisted, lounging on their balcony overlooking the Persian Gulf. James Morrison bought his girlfriend an entire island last month. There it was again, Morrison's name. It had been coming up more frequently lately, always as a comparison, always making Michael feel somehow inadequate, despite his own considerable success. "We're not Morrison," Michael snapped, his patience finally breaking. "And you're not his girlfriend." Sophia's eyes flashed dangerously. "No, maybe I should be." She stood, her silk robe catching the Arabian sunset. "At least he knows how to treat a woman of my caliber." "Your caliber?" Michael laughed bitterly. "And what caliber is that?" "The kind that helps a man cheat on his pregnant wife. The kind that embezzles company funds. The kind that—" The slap echoed across the balcony. Sophia's hand left a burning imprint on his cheek, her diamond ring cutting his skin slightly. "I'm going for a swim," she said coldly, gathering her designer beach bag. "When I return, you'd better have adjusted your attitude." But she didn't return. Hours passed, and the Dubai sunset faded into a star-filled night. Michael's calls went unanswered. Finally, at midnight, his phone chimed with a video message. The timestamp showed it was recorded 2 hours ago. The setting was the private beach of the competing hotel, the one where James Morrison was staying. Sophia sat on a golden chaise lounge, the same diamond ring Michael had given her catching the light as she draped herself across Morrison's lap. "Hello, darling." Her voice dripped with mock sweetness. "I suppose I should thank you for these past months. You were—" She paused, sharing a laugh with Morrison, a useful stepping stone. The camera panned to show Morrison's arm around her waist, his other hand holding a champagne flute. No hard feelings, Chen, Morrison smirked. Better men than you have underestimated Sophia. She's quite the strategic asset. The thing is, Michael, Sophia continued, you were never really in my league. Did you honestly think I'd settle for being the trophy wife of a mere startup CEO? She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. James here has offered me something much more substantial. A real empire, not your little tech company playing at greatness. The video continued, showing intimate moments between them, clearly filmed over several months. Hotel meetings in Singapore, secret rendezvous in New York, private jet trips to the Maldives. All those girls' weekends had been elaborate covers. Thanks for playing. Sophia concluded with a wink. I'd say it's not personal, but she kissed Morrison deeply, making sure her engagement ring was visible. That would be a lie. The video ended. Michael stood frozen on the balcony, 30 stories above Dubai's glittering landscape. His phone began buzzing with notifications. The video had been sent to every major tech news outlet, every board member, every industry insider. Within hours, photos flooded social media. Sophia and Morrison on his yacht, at exclusive clubs, in private jets. The timestamps revealed their affair had begun months ago, even before she'd accepted Michael's proposal. In their suite's bathroom, Michael stared at his reflection, remembering Emma's face the night she'd discovered his betrayal. Now he knew exactly how it felt to be the fool in love, the one who couldn't see the truth right in front of them. His phone rang, the board demanding an emergency meeting. But all he could think about was Emma, somewhere back in San Francisco. Michael's web of lies grew more intricate with each passing week. The Four Seasons knew him as Mr. Smith, always booking the corner suite on the 32nd floor. His calendar showed strategic planning every Wednesday evening, and international investor calls marked his occasional weekend absences. Each deception came easier than the last, like stepping stones leading him further from shore. You're distracted tonight, Sophia purred, tracing circles on his chest in the dimly lit hotel room. San Francisco glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a constellation of lights that seemed to mirror the sparkle in her eyes. Is it the Morrison deal? Emma had another ultrasound today, he admitted, the words heavy with guilt. It's a girl. Sophia sat up, the silk sheets sliding off her shoulders. Her expression hardened slightly before softening into practiced sympathy. That must be difficult for you. All these changes, all this responsibility. She reached for the bottle of Chateau Margaux on the nightstand. When was the last time someone asked what you wanted, Michael? The question hung in the air like smoke. When had someone last asked? Emma's world had become a carousel of doctor's appointments, birthing classes, and nursery colors. Their conversations revolved around hospitals and schools, a future that seemed to be racing toward him like an oncoming train. His phone chirped, a text from Emma. Baby kicked today. Wish you were here to feel it. Love you. Sophia glanced at the message over his shoulder. Domestic bliss, she said, a hint of mockery in her tone. Is that really what you want? To become just another suburban dad in a minivan? I love Emma, he said automatically. But the words felt hollow, rehearsed. Of course you do, Sophia replied, sliding out of bed and slipping into her La Perla lingerie with practiced grace. And I love my Hermes bags. Doesn't mean I want to own just one for the rest of my life. The following week, during Emma's 20-week checkup, Michael sat in a board meeting, his attention divided between quarterly projections and his buzzing phone. Each ignored call from Emma added another brick to the wall growing between them. But here, in the corporate battlefield, he felt alive, especially with Sophia at his side, her brilliant mind matching his move for move. Their affair became a dangerous dance of stolen moments and close calls. A charity gala at the De Young Museum nearly exposed them when Emma decided to surprise him, showing up in a midnight blue maternity gown that barely contained her growing belly. Michael watched in horror as his wife and mistress circled each other like planets in different orbits, neither aware of the other's gravitational pull. Your wife is glowing, Sophia commented later that night in their hotel room, her voice dripping with subtle venom. Motherhood suits her, so domestic. But even as she mocked Emma, Sophia's ambition and intelligence continued to intoxicate Michael. She challenged him intellectually, pushed his boundaries professionally. In her, he saw a reflection of his own drive, his own hunger for more than just domestic contentment. The guilt surfaced at odd moments, catching sight of the nursery door, now painted a soft pink, finding tiny baby shoes in Emma's shopping bags, watching her sleep with her hands protectively cradling their growing daughter. During these moments, the weight of his betrayal threatened to crush him. Yet each time the guilt became unbearable, Sophia would appear with another brilliant business strategy, another expensive adventure, another reminder of the life he could have, untethered, ambitious, free. She was his mirror, his enabler, his partner in a dance of destruction. "We're not hurting anyone," became their shared mantra, even as they watched Emma's growing isolation, her questioning looks, her desperate attempts to bridge the widening gap in her marriage. "Everyone will be happier in the end," they assured each other between champagne kisses and strategy sessions that turned into passionate encounters. But happiness, like truth, was becoming an increasingly fluid concept in Michael's world. Michael woke up in Sophia's penthouse, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the San Francisco Bay. The silk sheets whispered against his skin as he reached for his phone. 3 missed calls from his PR team, 7 news alerts mentioning his name, and a trending hashtag pregnant wife betrayal. "Ignore it," Sophia murmured, trailing manicured fingers down his chest. "The news cycle will move on. It always does." She stretched languidly, her diamond ring catching the morning light. "Besides, we have nothing to be ashamed of. Love is love." Across town, Emma lay in a hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily around her. The preterm labor had been stopped, but she remained under observation. Her sister Claire sat beside her, scrolling through her phone with increasing anger. "These vultures," Claire hissed, showing Emma another paparazzi photo. Michael and Sophia leaving a boutique hotel, his hand possessively on her lower back. "How dare they?" Emma turned away from the image, focusing instead on the ultrasound monitor where her daughter's heartbeat pulsed strong and steady. "Let them have their publicity," she said quietly. "I have something better." The following weeks played out in parallel narratives across social media and gossip columns. Michael and Sophia became Silicon Valley's most talked about couple, their relationship a mix of public displays of affection and power moves. They appeared at tech conferences together, Sophia's presence adding a sophisticated edge to Michael's corporate image. "They're calling us the new Bezos and Lauren," Sophia preened one evening at a charity gala, where she'd orchestrated their entrance to ensure maximum photographer coverage. "We're the future of tech power couples." Michael smiled for the cameras, ignoring the whispers that followed them. Some board members had expressed concerns about the scandal's impact on company image, but Sophia's connections had helped secure 3 new major investors. Success, he told himself, was the best revenge against judgment. Meanwhile, Emma's story took an unexpected turn. A photo of her helping a young cancer patient while visibly pregnant went viral, accompanied by a nurse's post about her dedication to her pediatric patients, despite personal trauma. The public narrative shifted. Here was a woman rising above betrayal, choosing to help others while carrying a child alone. "Dr. Chen, you have visitors," a nurse announced one afternoon. Emma looked up from her patient's chart to find a film crew in her office. "We're doing a documentary on women in medicine," the producer explained. "Your story inspired millions. Would you consider sharing it?" Emma's initial refusal softened when they mentioned including stories of her pediatric patients. If it helps other women feel less alone, or helps sick children get attention, then yes. As Emma's quiet dignity captured hearts, Michael and Sophia's honeymoon phase began showing subtle cracks. During a board meeting, Michael noticed Sophia texting under the table, her smile oddly reminiscent of the one she'd worn while deceiving Emma. "Who are you messaging?" he asked later that night. "Just networking, darling," she replied, kissing him with expensive lipstick. "That's what power couples do." He watched her walk away, remembering Emma's similar questions months ago. The irony wasn't lost on him, but he pushed the thought aside. This was different. They were different. That night, unable to sleep, Michael found himself watching Emma's documentary interview online. She sat in her office, family photos removed from the walls behind her, speaking with calm strength about balancing medical emergencies with her high-risk pregnancy. "Sometimes life forces you to choose what truly matters," she said on screen. "I choose my daughter. I choose my patients. I choose to be someone she can be proud of." Michael closed the laptop, but Emma's words echoed in his mind as Sophia's designer heels clicked across the marble floor, heading for another late-night networking event.